So this year, I picked up a one-year chronological Bible, and I've not read a chronological Bible before that puts things in a chronological order rather than how they're traditionally arranged in the Bible by genre. And one that I've been in the last few weeks, finished Numbers and into Joshua, and we see the Bible character really struck me as Caleb. Caleb's story is spread out in a few different places. And I think we all know well the first part of the story. But I found the story of him later in life when he's 85 years old to be very inspiring as a model of faith for us, as well as a man that had a good, winning, can-do type of attitude. He was one that didn't care what the majority thought. He was one that lived an example of living for the Lord and acting in a way to honor God and to have faith in God, even when all those around him were not. Numbers 13, starting at verse 17, Caleb appears during the time of the Exodus, where God's people had been slaves in Egypt, and God miraculously sets them free. And you see in the Exodus, miracle after miracle happening, God coming through and showing up again and again, yet we see a story of people that complain every step of the way. People that get nervous and want to go back to Egypt. They say, well, I don't know what to do with my newfound freedom. I don't know where we're going to get our food. Let's all go back to Egypt, they keep saying. Yeah, and Moses has his hands full keeping them in line. I read it and can't help feeling sorry for Moses, with the immense responsibility that God asked him to do with these people who are so faithless and ungrateful so many different times. And if we see two of Moses' top people coming up are Joshua and Caleb. Now, Joshua becomes Moses' successor of the next leader of the people, but then we have Caleb, and Caleb is such a good example for us. One that went against the grain to take a stand for the Lord. Numbers 13, verse 17, when Moses sent them to explore Canaan, he said, go up through the Negev on into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kinds of towns do they live in? Are they unwalled or fortified? How is the soil? Is it fertile or poor? Are there trees in it? Do your best to bring back some of the fruit of the land. It was season for the first ripe grapes. So God had told them that they're going to go and inhabit the promised land, and that it's going to be theirs forever for them and their descendants. Yet, they haven't been there yet. It kind of blew my mind. I'd heard this story. I remember, you hear about the Exodus, you learn about the Exodus if you grow up in church. You hear about it so many times in church, and they're wandering 40 years in the wilderness. And yet, remember one time when I was a little older, I looked at a Bible map, looked at the distance, and thought, well, they're probably moving slowly. They have elderly people. They have little children. They have all their possessions. They have livestock with them. But still, this journey should have taken them a few weeks. Yet, they're going around and around, camping for 40 years. waiting to take possession of it, not yet having a place of their own. And so they do not yet know what's there. Moses gets 12 people, a representative from each tribe, and sends them in to see what we're up against and what it's like. Is it worth taking? Yet God has told them that they're to take it. Verse 21. So they went up and explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob, toward Lebo Hamath. And they went through the Negev and came to Hebron, where Ahiman, Sheshai, and Tamai, descendants of Anak, lived. Hebron had been built 7 years before in Zone of Egypt. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. Now you all know what one cluster of grapes looks like. Right? Hold it up. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshcol because of the cluster of grapes the Israelites cut off there. At the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. So you have this one cluster of grapes that it makes a point to say that it had to be carried on a pole by 2 people. So I don't know what you're picturing, but I'm picturing bowling ball-sized grapes. I mean, it doesn't tell us, but in order to have 2 people heave-ho it back with it being hung on a pole, that's like no grapes I've ever seen before. So this was something, and they're gone 40 days. 40 significant biblically. 40 days exploring the land, seeing what's there, and coming back to make a report. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. They reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. They gave Moses this account. We went into the land which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here is its fruit. And I've been asked before, what does it mean flowing with milk? A river of milk? A milk creek? No. Flowing with milk would be that, abundant livestock to be able to have milk. Lots of honey, beehives. And when they get there, the Lord tells them there's vineyards that are there that they didn't plant. That was theirs for the taking. Farms that they could just move into. Houses built. Verse 28. It all sounds really good so far. Giant grapes, milk and honey. Verse 28, but, yes, there's a downside. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. So, there's powerful people there. The cities are fortified. And why is this significant? Well, in the ancient world, fortified cities would be ones with a wall around them. You couldn't just invade it easily. You had to get through a wall around the city. You have to get through that. That's not so important anymore because now we have aircraft. Before you had a fortified city, think a castle that would be very, very difficult to scale the walls and get into without being shot with an arrow or having rocks dropped on your head. Or one thing guards of walls would do would be pour boiling oil down on people trying to climb up in order to stop them. So it could be very hard to get in. Now, in the age of aircrafts, You could fire a tank at a wall and demolish it pretty quickly. You could send a helicopter or airplane over to drop bombs in, and the wall's no more. But fortified cities make it very hard. And then it says, we even saw descendants of Anak there. Let's talk about that in just a minute. The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites live in the hill country. And the Canaanites live near the sea and along the Jordan. So there are already several people groups living there that are powerful with fortified cities and descendants of Anak. Descendants of Anak, the Bible tells us, are very, very large people. Then Caleb silenced the people before Moses and said, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. Now they went in there to see how good the land is, but also to see what they're up against. And for the people, for 10 of the spies that went in as part of this mission, they're saying there's too many of them. Cities are fortified, and there are some of these large people, descendants of Anak, living there. We better not. So they wanted to keep up their wandering in the wilderness. Some of them wanted to go back to Egypt. But Caleb said, we can do it. Caleb wasn't looking at just numbers and odds. He believed we can do it because God said we can do it. And that seemed to be all that matters to him. That took a lot of faith. Now, it's faith here. I mean, he was facing a life-risking proposition for himself and for his people, yet he believed and trusted God. If he got it wrong, well, he'd be killed in war, and his people might get wiped out. Yet, God had told them that that's what they're supposed to do. And that's one of the first things we learn about him is, do we look at what God asks us to do, or do we look at things from a sense of practicality and what everybody else is doing? Caleb saying we should go up and take possession of the land, for we certainly can do it. That's been the narrative thus far all along. God's telling them and repeats himself again and again. Here's where you're going to go. You're going to take possession of this land, and it's going to be yours and your descendants. But, 31, but the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They are stronger than we are. And they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land that they had explored. They said, the land we explore devours those who are living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim there, the descendants of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. So we see these people in the Bible again and again, the Nephilim, and the Anakim, and the Rephaim. Large people. They're called giants. We first see them in Genesis chapter 6. Genesis 6 verse 1. When men began to multiply on the face of the land, and the daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. The Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterwards, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So this can create a bit of confusion. So the question becomes, who were the sons of God and the daughters of men? There are a few theories on this. Some would say that the sons of God were the godly descendants of Adam and descendants of his son Seth. And the daughters of men, the theory is, were the sinful descendants of Cain. So the godly line being mixed with a wicked line and creating great wickedness in the land. Yet we see in ancient writing and in the book of Job, throughout the book of Job, sons of God often means angels. So there's a theory that fallen angels were having offspring with human women. Now, a lot of people say that's not possible. They often quote Jesus' words that the angels in heaven neither marry nor are given in marriage, yet doesn't explicitly deal with the issue of procreation. Some say that's impossible. Others say it could be a human that's possessed by a demon that's having offspring. Yet, since these were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Interesting to read up on it. And then you have later, here in Numbers and Joshua, the Anakim, descendant, simply means descendants of Anak. And that's a question biblical scholars and Christians debate. Were they just a race of large people? It says the Nephilim are there. The Anakim, Nephilim has come to mean mighty men or giants. Anakim simply means descendants of Anak. They're big. Later on, Goliath was one of them. But it says the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. So were they just large people, like think NBA players and NFL players, some really big guys? A race of genetically large race, or some sort of supernatural hybrids that are very, very large. The other word you see is Rephaim, used to describe these large people. Rephaim simply means dead ones. And why are they called dead ones? We're not quite sure, other than every time they appear in Scripture, it seems the purpose of bringing them up is so that they can be killed. The supernatural descendants theory definitely explains in Joshua why they all needed to die, as the Lord says to kill every last one of them, as well as in the Genesis, where the whole earth needed to be flooded and everybody must die, other than Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, and their wives. A theory of possible genetic corruption, of no longer having purebred humans. Very, very interesting. Yeah, I'm getting kind of scratching the surface on that, which isn't the main point of our text. The main point of our text is, one way or the other, there were some very large people that they had to go fight. So they're saying verse 33, we saw the Nephilim there. The descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. Race of large people living there, they see them and they lost their nerve. And then Numbers 14, 6 through 10. That night, the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, "If only we had died in Egypt or in this wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us up to this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to each other, "We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt." Well, God had already given them the leader. His name was Moses. God had set them free, and they wanted to go back. The Bible has a lot to say about it looking back. Remember Lot's wife? told, don't look back. She turned into a pillar of salt. The Bible tells us, those of us that are believers, we have the new nature of the new man living by the Spirit, and the old nature, the old man, which is sin. And yet, the old man seems to be never all the way dead, is he? Trying to pull us back into those things that we used to be into. Trying to pull us back into a sinful life. Just like these people, they're wanting to go back to what they knew. Their old patterns and their old life. Even though God miraculously set them free. We should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole assembly of Israelites gathered there. Joshua, son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who explored the land, tore their clothes and said to the entire assembly. Now, this was something culturally that is foreign to us that we don't do. When people would grieve, they would rip their clothes, Hulk out. In a way, you see that throughout the Bible, yet we grieve differently. Nobody's ripping their clothes off at the funerals, but we have. But it was a cultural thing that they did when they were grieved. When they grieved. So it says Joshua and Caleb tore their clothes and said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased to us, he will lead us into the land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and will give it to us. Only do not rebel against the Lord, and do not be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. Then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of the meeting to all the Israelites. Caleb was one. He was ready to risk his life. He was ready to lay it all on the line to do what God told them to do. Caleb here, and in the passage before, he faced peer pressure, but he didn't give in. Now, peer pressure, we talk about that with teenagers a lot. Your mom probably told you, probably more than once. But mom, come on, everybody's doing it. Yeah, if everybody was jumping off a bridge, would you be jumping off a bridge too? Yes, that's the old motherly advice. Common sense is, well, no, when you put it that way, of course not. Yet you have some of us of like, yeah, of course, I don't want to be left with no friends, right? But peer pressure is not just for kids. It's not just for teenagers. Maybe it's a little stronger then, but it remains throughout our life. What our friends and families are doing, we feel group pressure to do. And that really never seems to go away. Yet, I think the blessing about getting older is the older you get, the more perspective you have, the more groups of friends you've had, people that come and go and move away, and you see things more clearly. Right? People get older, you stop worrying about impressing other people because it doesn't always do a lot of good. You know, people stop caring about the latest fashion. You don't want to just keep continually buying good clothes all the time. And I find as people get older, they seem to care less and less about what everybody else thinks and about what everybody else is doing. You come to know yourself better, and what you like seems to matter more. Right? Just give me a real bit. Caleb's being pressured. Joshua's being pressured as well. Yet here, they're the only two people that take a stand with Moses to obey God, to do what God tells them to do. They're an inspiration and example because they didn't give in. I remember I've had some fun in my past as a youth pastor. And one lesson I've given to a few different groups is bringing in, doing a youth group lesson where we have hot sauce tasting or hot things. Bring in some hot sauces, bring in some peppers. We asked who wants to play. Who wants to play a hot sauce game? Who wants to do hot sauce tasting? And usually all the boys sign up. And the girls are usually a little bit smarter for seeing it for what it is. And we start with like a hot tamale candy. And then a mild salsa, a medium salsa, a hot salsa, and then you work them up toward the end, where at the end you're getting a hot sauce with a Carolina Reaper or a ghost pepper, and then you do it in phases. But if you do it right, you don't even have to do it right. They do it for you. Especially the boys, they're egging each other on. It becomes a contest. And then, often by the end, you get some middle school boys, it's like, at the end of it, had a few of them crying. And then we go into a lesson about peer pressure and why you shouldn't let other people egg you on or make you do something that you're not comfortable with. It's really fun. They'll remember it forever. But Caleb wasn't worried about peer pressure. He's saying, don't be afraid of them. We have God on our side. And they don't have God's protection. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. But then the glory of the Lord appeared at the tent of meeting for all the Israelites. And then Caleb pops up again in the book of Joshua. So we've read two passages from the book of Numbers. Now, Joshua and Caleb were ready to go in, so we have two tribes that want to go in. Caleb was the representative of the tribe of Judah, yet it also calls him a Kenizzite, which is one of the Canaanite people group. Yet Exodus mentions again and again through the time of the Exodus that they were a mixed multitude. So perhaps he was of mixed race. Joshua 14, 6 through 15. Well, the people, they could have gone in then and taken the promised land, but because the majority of them didn't want to, God let them wander a lot longer. And as judgment, God said, all the people who left Egypt, because of all their bad behavior and not being willing to go in, they're all going to die off, and the second generation is going to go in and take the promised land. So all the people who had been slaves, and their mentality and everything that went with it needed to die off for the second generation to go in. Yet Caleb and Joshua got to go because their hearts were pure and they were ready to obey God. So God granted it for them to be able to go in. Now the people of Judah approached Joshua at Gilgal, and Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, the Kenizzite, said to him, "You know what the Lord said to Moses, the man of God, at Kadesh Barnea about you and me. I was 40 years old when Moses, the servant of the Lord, sent me from Kadesh Barnea to explore the land. And I brought him back a report according to my convictions. But my fellow Israelites who went up with me made the hearts of the people melt in fear. They spread fear. I, however, followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So on that day Moses swore to me, the land on which your feet have walked will be your inheritance and that of your children forever, because you have followed the Lord my God wholeheartedly. So the Lord has said he's going to reward Caleb with some land for his obedience, for his faith. And so Caleb is bringing that up to Joshua, because Joshua is in charge now. Now then, just as the Lord promised, he has kept me alive for 45 years since the time he said this to Moses. So he's 40 when he goes in as a spy. 45 years have passed. 40 plus 45 is he's now 85 years old. So he has kept me alive 45 years since the time he said this to Moses, while Israel moved about in the wilderness. So here I am today, 85 years old. I am still as strong today as the day Moses sent me out. I'm just as vigorous to go out to battle now as I was then. So the Lord kept Moses strong into his old age, miraculously so, and we get the sense that the same thing may have been going on with Caleb. 85 is still as strong as a young man. He still had a lot of life left in the old boy here. Now give me this hill country that the Lord promised me that day. You yourself have heard then that the Anakites, remember who were the Anakites? The really big people? The Anakites were there, and their cities were large and fortified. But the Lord helping me, I will drive them out just as they said. So here they've been on a conquest. They've taken much of the promised land. They've started assigning to the different tribes their places to live, and yet this area hasn't been cleared yet, this hill country. So he's saying, I'd like to ask for the promise of God to be fulfilled. Give me the hill country. We haven't taken it yet, but I'm not afraid. I am not afraid to go in and take it. Those giant people are still living there, but with the Lord's help, I'm going to drive them out. Whatever's in front of him didn't seem as significant as to who was behind him. And what do we mean by that? Who was behind him? The Lord was behind him. And when the Lord's behind you, it doesn't matter what's in front of you. Nothing can stand up to God. Nothing, no obstacle can get in your way if God wants you to clear it. And God had told him that God's with him, and this is going to be yours. And this is an example of faith. He's still waiting for that promise to be fulfilled. He's still waiting for his land. And here he is, 85 years old, saying, I'm going to put my armor on, and I'm ready to go take it. Yeah, that's I find that inspiring. How about you? Yeah, then Joshua blessed Caleb, son of Jephunneh, and gave him Hebron as his inheritance. So Hebron belonged to Caleb, son of Jephunneh the Kenizzite, ever since, because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. That's the key verse here. Because he followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly. Not a lot of people, even in the Bible, that it says that. Not a whole lot of people have followed the Lord wholeheartedly, with all their hearts. Yet, we're called to do that, to do it to the best of our ability, to have faith in God, to not worry about what everybody else is doing. When God's asked us to do something, and to follow God wholeheartedly. It's not an easy thing to do. Do you think this was easy for Caleb and Joshua going against everybody else in their country except for Moses and Aaron? I mean, you have the four of them standing as an example. They're people angry enough to stone them, yet he followed God wholeheartedly, just as we're called to do, and he was rewarded for it. God made good on his promise. And then it says in 15, Hebron used to be called Kirath Araba after Arba, who was the greatest man among the Anakites. Then the land had rest from war. So this land was named after some of the Anakites, the big people. But not anymore. Not anymore. He was willing to take a stand for the Lord, and to go against the grain, to go against everybody else. Just he and Joshua. You know, there are people that take a stand that we can admire. Maybe one of the greatest stand takers that came to mind for me was, I learned about him in my travels, my motorhome trip this past summer. I went to tour the Minuteman missile silos, and the Minuteman missiles was our nuclear program, where we had the ability to launch nuclear missiles just about anywhere in the world and destroy cities in 30 minutes or less, just with the entering of a code and press of a button. And there are several sites of these missile silos. And yet, during the Cold War, we really had the ability, along with other countries, to pretty much destroy the world. And there was an arms race of the United States having missiles and the Soviet Union having missiles. We're trying to outgun them, and they're trying to outgun us. And there was the understanding that if they launch one at us or we launch one at them, the other side's going to retaliate. So we each have a checkmate on one another. And one day in 1983, there was a Soviet colonel where the radar picked something up. And it was his orders to launch a nuclear warhead at the United States. And pretty much it was orders on our side that if any of them were launched at us, we're launching them back. So, and if any more are coming back, and so the world as we know it's about to end here. So Stanislav Petrov, a Soviet colonel, had the orders to launch it. Yet he didn't say how, but he had a sense that something was wrong, that something may have been malfunctioning. So he disobeyed orders and didn't launch. He got in a lot of trouble for it afterwards, but yet maybe you've never heard of him. He's a hero. I mean, if he would have followed orders and pushed that button, none of us might be here talking about it today. Yeah, being brave enough to defy orders. Well, he said that kind of tanked his military career after that. And years later, after the Minuteman missiles were decommissioned and became a national park site where you could go and tour it, he came over and got to tour the site. He said never in his wildest dreams did he imagine that he'd get to go over and see where they would have launched from the other side. Yet, we can learn a lot from brave people. Caleb, brave person willing to risk his life in the life of his people to obey God. Caleb facing immense peer pressure, but standing his ground. Caleb, who had a can-do attitude, a positive outlook, even at 85, being willing to go fight in order to fulfill God's promise. Caleb, one who followed the Lord, the God of Israel, wholeheartedly, just as we're called to. Great, great hero of the faith. Let us find inspiration and be fired up and motivated by hearing about his life and faith that was put into our Bible, the Word of God, that we might follow his brave example. Amen.